Hey man, how's it going?
Bonjour. Good to be here in beautiful Paris. I'm thrilled to be asked to be here and appreciative of your time and consideration. It's great to be back.
I mean, that's awesome. I'm so happy to have you. I'm my first guest in person in Paris. You're coming from Florida.
Yeah.
That's not super close, but you made the trip.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you have an amazing talk tomorrow with Chameleon, right? Unite Days. It's going to be awesome. So thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you for the platform, Fail Fast Forward, giving a voice to experimentation, A/B testing here, not only in Paris, but over in the United States as well. You know, you're doing a good job expanding your footprint and your capabilities at Henkin and Partners. Your clients should be very pleased with that.
Thanks, man. So just for the new audience, could you maybe re-explain where you're coming from, who you are, what are your different experiences in experimentation?
Happy to. My career did not start with A/B testing, right? It started in sales, got into digital marketing, email marketing, landing page, right? Digital ads, trying to generate leads. That's really what I started was as a B2B marketer.
Yeah.
So it was all about lead generation, cost of lead acquisition, right? We put out these ads in LinkedIn, in Google, and you pay money to get impressions and eyeballs on those ads, but those eyeballs and impressions ultimately wind up hopefully being clicks and lead forms being filled out. So I kind of started to tinker with which copy, which image maybe led itself to a little bit better of lead conversion rates. That's where I just kind of dipped my toes into the water there.
Did you like it?
I actually did like B2B marketing.
Yeah.
It was a little more, how do I say? It was a little more like hard copy. Hey, this is the savings that you'll get. This is why our company is great at doing this for your company. So it was harder. It was harder marketing though, because you're trying to get companies to use your product, and as you know, right, Henkin and Partners, you guys are B2B,
Of course.
At the end of the day. So that's where it started, and then ultimately, I got going into A/B testing as a senior A/B testing analyst at Lowe's, which is a online e-commerce store popular in the States. That's where the curtain was pulled back, and you started to realize all of the nuances and intricacies and characteristics, nuances of A/B testing. I was fortunate to do that at Lowe's, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, for a little over 3 years. Worked tests on homepage, category pages, product list pages, which I know something that last time we spoke, you mentioned one of the things you were working on was filters. And I'd love to talk more about that, because that's fascinating. And I think you even were leveraging AI to try and
Yeah, we tried.
and I'm sure that you did a good job at it. Did that at Lowe's for about 3 years. At the time, I met my now wife in Charlotte. She got a job in Florida, where we currently live, for the professional golf tour, PGA Tour, which had her to be local in the South Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra Beach area. So as a result, I went down there with her, knowing this is also mid-pandemic, that I was still working for Lowe's. I knew I was going to have to kind of probably end my employment with Lowe's and find something else. I was fortunate then to have an opportunity to work for Microsoft as an experimentation program manager for Xbox. Did that remotely for about a year and a half, and then ultimately wound my way to Ford Credit, where I am today. So it's been a wild ride, but it all started as a marketer.
That's cool. That's cool. Last time we talked about your transition from your first experience to Microsoft, which was a bit crazy, because obviously Microsoft is one of the most advanced programs in the world. Mm-hmm. Could you re-explain a little bit that transition?
Yeah. So I think for me, what the challenge was as an A/B testing analyst at Lowe's, I was kind of, I hate to use the word like a ticket taker, but every test was a ticket, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of had to groom the ticket, make sure that the hypothesis made sense, make sure that we had tags, make sure that we had what we needed to kind of run. So I always kind of refer to it like I was in the weeds. I was in the weeds of every single test that I was either assigned to, or like I think we had a waterfall where as an intake would come in, you would get assigned it. The next one comes in, I get assigned it. Next one, Victory gets assigned it. So you manage your ticket load, make sure that you can kind of work those tickets through the process of testing. And that was great because you learned a lot.
Most companies work like that, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think maybe depending on the size of the company, right? If you're an internal team, that's probably, and then even then, I think they talk about, okay, is it a center of excellence team where or is it part of each individual product for an organization? So at Lowe's, in the weeds, move over to Microsoft, and it was less in the weeds and more at a higher level program. How many tickets are we getting? How many hypotheses are getting created? How many tests are getting flighted? How many of those tests are being flighted, reported, and shared, and then ultimately decisioned on too? Because that's really the name of the game is are we making production changes based on these test results? So my goal at Microsoft was less, what's the KPI, what's the hypothesis, and more, are we meeting or exceeding our service level agreement for a test from kind of start to finish? Because at Microsoft, in my estimation, the product managers and the product teams, experimentation was like built in. It wasn't an afterthought or do I have to test this? Like everything was tested. There was, so it was already part of their culture. And as a result, the volume was so high. Again, I was just working on Xbox specifically, but that was Xbox.com, Xbox the console, Xbox the mobile app. And then I had colleagues that I worked with that covered Microsoft 365, Microsoft Surface, and I think that was it for us in our little area.
That is super impressive. A question I'm wondering is, so you mentioned product managers, etc. It's part of the culture to experiment at Microsoft. Why is that? How come it's part of the culture? Because in so many other companies, if I think of Vencan, quite often my role is actually trying to convince people to experiment. Is there like a secret that you can share with us, or is it just about hiring the right people from the start?
I think I think it would be more so the latter, right?
Yeah.
Like either they hired product members, product teams, product managers that were already knowledgeable of what experimentation is and how it can be used, or they trained them and said, hey, if you're going to do anything on your product, wherever you're working on, M365, Outlook, Teams, Xbox, we then need to teach you what experimentation is or why it is useful. So I think, in addition to, we talked about it last time too, I think they built that EXP tool probably 15, maybe 20 years ago now, when it maybe really kind of started. And it services all of their products, and it makes a lot of sense, you know? So I think it really is more of like either like you're hired because you're knowledgeable of it, and maybe it's permeated its way into universities, like, digital product management. Maybe that's a class. I don't know if it wasn't when I was in college.
Me neither.
But if that is, that's great. And then experimentation is even earlier, kind of getting to be a part of product and product management and product leaders.
And you mentioned to me also before our conversation, all the tests were back-end tests. So obviously it's in the also tech culture of building those tests, right? You didn't have to kind of interrogate anyone to build any test or justify the fact that you would have to build them in the roadmap. Everything was built back-end.
Yes, at least at Microsoft, there was probably a handful of tests that for whatever reason needed to be executed with, I think they at the time used Target, just either this Surface, as they called it, this Surface wasn't onboarded onto EXP yet, or for whatever reason, there was a development challenge, but it was a very rare case. I would say 98% of the time, everything that I saw from a testing perspective, specifically at Xbox and again M365 and Surface, was flighted with EXP. It was analyzed via EXP. Everything. It was an all-in-one platform, which is interesting too because I think the other software providers, most notably Chameleon, they're like, hey, we are an all-in-one platform, and I'm thrilled to see that there are organizations like Chameleon, Optimizely, that are perhaps taking a little market share away from the Adobe Targets of the world, from some of the larger providers.
As you have used both tools now, internal tools at Microsoft and also tools like Optimizely, and we'll talk about it. Do you see a big difference between those type of tools, or do you feel like maybe the Optimizely and Chameleon are kind of going in the same direction as the tools like you mentioned, EXP?
I certainly think so. At even at Lowe's, they started to build out their own internal testing tool, and when I was there, it was starting to kind of get legs and had a very similar feel to that of an EXP, but notably not there yet. But in my estimation, for both Lowe's, their internal tool, and at Microsoft, the UI, the ability to set up a test was, I think, a little more IT intensive, certainly compared to that of the Chameleons and Optimizers and Targets for that matter. But I think it was also because like they built it with, I think, really with the developer in mind, and not necessarily maybe a product or a business person. Like the developer could clearly understand, okay, I need to create my code that calls this value. Yeah. I pass that value up to the experimentation team, and that's what they use to then call my code and flight the test. So I think UI, or the ability to use the internal tools, will probably always maybe be a little more rigorous, a little more complex in setup than compared to Chameleons and Optimizely, where on the UI is really very friendly. Very friendly.
Of course. And you also mentioned to me before scorecards. That's how you would analyze actually the test over there.
Yep.
Any secrets to reveal?
The challenge was, and I'll just speak to Xbox, right? So there was usually two kind of primary functions that were happening. One was engagement, like player engagement. Our customers, our Xbox users, playing the game more. Are they spending more time playing the game? Are they maybe purchasing more products within that game? Because a lot of the games now are like in-game purchases. So half of our scorecards were all about just kind of player engagement. The other half was more, I think, business friendly, which was like really more revenue related. Hey, did customers buy more games? Did customers spend more on average on these types of games? Or so when you had to balance the engagement, like the user engagement against the business impact, that was a balancing act that we kind of had to paint the picture of, engagement really wasn't there, but the revenue was. Or alternatively, sometimes you kind of call it whack-a-mole, right? But in each individual scorecard, and this is what is just so still unbelievably fascinating to me, was that each scorecard typically would have, at minimum, probably 100, 150, maybe 200 individual metrics.
It's crazy.
And each metric sometimes had 3 variations of it, like an average, an individual. And so they had quite a few metrics. And so that's each scorecard. And then once you run the numbers and you say, okay, well, now give me back each metric that had a statistically significant result. Yeah. You kind of filter down from 150, 200 down to like 50, right? 50 stat sig metrics on this scorecard, 50 stat sig metrics on this scorecard, 50 stat sig metrics, and trying to pull out the meaning from those scorecards as it related to an A/B test was was challenging. I mean, that was far and away for me was the hardest part. Was like, okay, do we believe the data and like what took place in this test for me to then confidently go over to Mr. or Miss Stakeholder and say, here's what happened in your test.
Yeah.
And you can stand on these results and we believe it. So I thought it was fascinating. And I actually think, I could be wrong, that was probably even some of the most early adoption of like machine learning and AI was the ability to, with a click of a button, whittle down, in aggregate, thousands of metrics down into 100 that were stat sig and moved as a result of the change that we put forth for the visitor.
Something that really impressed me in what you're saying is, first of all the metrics that you were collecting, and especially nowadays with the current clients that we have, many of them actually are struggling on this analytics part, either because they're on Google Analytics 4 and they're struggling to use the tool, or they have a stack that is maybe a bit complex for them with multiple tools like a GA, but also a content square, etc. And whenever I talk with people like you from top-notch company in digital, I always notice that the analytics is just perfect. Like they're tracking everything, and everything is like super simple to query and to use. I mean, when you're mentioning 100 metrics and you're able to, slim them down to maybe 30 in just a couple of seconds. I mean, in most companies, just requesting maybe 20, 30 metrics would take like days or weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm super impressed with those companies like you mentioned, like Microsoft or Xbox, the ability to query data super fast, use it, and spending the time on mostly analyzing rather than all the rest.
I think I think analytics / tagging, I think, is it sometimes referred to at Microsoft. They use terminology called telemetry, which is descriptive, and it's just, hey, is the telemetry there for us to use to then measure against, right? I think, to your point, most websites, page views, bounce rates, click rates, add to carts, purchases, maybe scroll depth. There's quite a few, I think, metrics that you can almost always rely on for an A/B test. But when you get into product, then there are maybe some different nuances to what a page view is compared to an impression. But at the end of the day, we as experimenters, we are nothing without tagging and analytics. I could split traffic on your page and tell you, we had a 50-50 split and you had 100,000 people in control and 100,000 people in treatment. What does it mean if we're not able to determine what that customer did as a result of the change that we put forth, right? So I would agree. I think maybe setting up tagging, setting up telemetry, click tags, page views, and that is a bit of development work too, right?
Yeah,
I don't think the traditional product or business person is going to know how to. They may be knowledgeable of it, but to go into the back end of your website via GA4, Google Tag Manager, that I think is perhaps a bit of a barrier to entry, But if you can set the foundation, implement, for a thin website, 10 metrics, that matter, and then you can kind of start testing and seeing which ones move based on it. I think that's how you can get going. But you could probably spend a lot of time on defining metrics and then implementing them. But I think the typical business product person may not be able to do that. But they can certainly help strategize. What's important for me as the site owner or as the product owner? Let's go put those tags in place. Then we can start doing some A/B testing, because truth is in data. There's a single source of truth. And I tend to believe it should be those analytic measurements.
So I like what you just said. You're starting with, what's important for me. I think that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Maybe not starting to collect the data or starting to test. The first thing is what's important for me, what's important for my customers. That's really cool. That's a good sentence.
One of the things I learned a lot about too, and I thought about it, is even like this notion, if we're talking about metrics, it's I've heard it referred to sometimes as vanity metrics, right? Page views could to a degree could be like, so what? You know?
Yeah.
But if you're like, I'm really trying to generate eyes on this particular either portion of the page or this page itself, page views may be important to you. Another vanity metric, most notably over at Lowe's, was add to cart, right?
What does that mean? You know?
Right. It means we are measuring the number of times that you, Alex, add something to your basket, to your cart, right? And that's good. Oh, we tested this and we saw a 15% lift in add to cart rates. Great. But what was the conversion rate then of those products that were added to your cart? Because I think it's kind of like saying, oh, we could stuff as many people into cart and checkout as you want. But if they are not checking out at a higher rate, what is the purpose?
Totally.
You know, you're giving them another opportunity to maybe fall out or drop out or abandon, you know? So like add to cart is I think to an e-com site, it's an important metric, but it could maybe be viewed as a bit of a vanity metric. Like, okay, so what?
No, totally. Sometimes we don't think enough about the human side of things. I mean, imagine you're in the real supermarket and some people are just adding product to the cart, but they're not paying. I mean, you'd be pissed off, right? You wouldn't even care that they're putting stuff in the cart. But sometimes, in e-commerce, we're like, oh, that's so cool. You know, we increased by, like you mentioned, 15% people adding product to the carts. Okay, cool. What's next? You know,
it'd be like at the grocery store and they're just putting stuff on the conveyor belt, right? But the lady at checkout can't scan it or man can't scan it fast enough. So it's like you're just creating a bottleneck.
Yeah.
However, one could also view that as, and I would make the argument. I would say, okay, you know, if you're a product manager for a product detail page, you're probably a lot of times you're going to say, I need to get added carts up. And in doing so, you could make that permanent change, right? Better images, better description, better copy, you know, whatever it is that ultimately leads to the additions or the lift in add to carts. But now you're really giving the cart and checkout team more traffic and giving them the ability to test with more traffic and be able to, try out different things that lead to higher checkout rates. So it really is, and you could look at it from an e-com site. And this is what I loved about Lowe's was like everybody knew their part. Homepage, your job was to get people into like an interior page, a category page. Category page managers, your job, there's a lot more to it than that. You want to get them into list pages, lists of product. List managers, you want to get them into product detail pages, product people, you know. So it was like a beautiful kind of flow.
Yeah.
And if everybody kind of did their job and say, hey, I'm getting people to the next step of the purchase process, a 1% increase, a 5% increase, it's good for the business, right? But there are like the individual pages that get the customer all the way down there. And so I think it's all good, but metrics and truth in data, it starts and ends there, you know?
And now you transition to a new challenge, right? Full credits.
Also, as you being a father, you know, and managing, yes, you know, work and life and family. But yes, I was fortunate to get an opportunity to go from Microsoft to Ford Credit, which is the preferred lending partner of Ford Motor Company. Okay. And I've been there for about a year now as a product specialist in experimentation, really kind of focusing on what we call our consumer product teams, which are, you know, like products where customers go in and make their monthly payment for their vehicle, or perhaps they are interested in maybe like pre-qualifying for some financing. Maybe they are also interested in going to a Ford Credit application and maybe calculating a potential payment for a vehicle that they're interested in. And so I'm fortunate to work with those product folks.
Could you tell us a bit more about Ford? I'm sure everybody knows Ford, but you know, just for the French people only liking Citroën and Peugeot.
Well, Ford, you know, is one of the original 3 auto manufacturers that kind of, defined and built out really a lot of times, I think, the lean manufacturing process. You know, that's really at the end of the day, they are an automaker. And so they have a series of plants and factories throughout the country and throughout the world. And I really think personally that the challenge is kind of managing their inventory of products and working with dealerships to make sure that those dealers can sell the vehicles at an equal rate too, because you don't want to have too much product sitting on the shelf for, inventory, if you will, and not enough customers. So they, obviously have been doing it for a very long time. And most recently, I think not necessarily with the introduction of Tesla, but like with electric vehicles, I think us as well, we're kind of having to now think about how do we accommodate the battery electric vehicle customers out there that are interested in that type of vehicle, which traditionally Ford, I don't think really did that for a long time, but we're definitely kind of stepping into it, leaning into it, because there's market there for it. And of course,
totally.
If there's a market for it, like we want to give you a product that can do it.
Makes sense. So is Ford Credit, is it more like a bank, or do you feel like more working for a bank, or do you still feel that automobile vibe?
I would probably say for my day to day, it's more of a bank feel. Even though like we are not a bank, we are kind of a facilitator of for the customer to have an opportunity to purchase a vehicle using Ford financing. So much of the name of the game for me internally is how do we not only get customers to ensure that they make their payments, but there are times too when maybe a customer needs a payment extension. So let's help them do that, because if they miss payments, then that's not good for either party. So it's how do we get customers to make sure that they make their payments and keep up with their cars? How do we get customers to potentially buy their second vehicle too, right? Just because you bought one doesn't mean that you are done with the Ford family, right? We want to say, hey, you're coming towards the end of your finance, or you're coming towards the end of your lease. What do you think about maybe this car or that car? And then most notably, I think for me, kind of coming as outside looking in, I've always thought about coming from e-com, coming from B2B, new customers. How do we get new customers? How do we get new customers to get interested in using Ford Credit for their financing of a Ford vehicle, or Lincoln for that matter? So those are the three kind of areas that I focus on, is like getting customers make their payments, getting customers to be a repeat customer, and net new customers as well.
So new customers, it's I guess lead gen, or phone calls. What
you could definitely consider it like lead gen, like net new, right? But even sometimes in what we call like an account space or an authenticated customer, we still maybe want to give them the opportunity to either like refer a new customer too, maybe we can give you like a deal or something on your current car or your current financing terms. So there's a couple different ways to get into the fold at Credit. But most notably, we kind of try and get them pre-qualified, which is effectively a lead for them.
Nice. And so how's the digital team over there? What does it look like?
They are wonderful. I mean, honestly, Ford Credit is a family oriented business, and I can say that with confidence. And that was definitely a little bit of a mentality shift from being at Microsoft. So at Credit, everyone is once again kind of working towards the same goal, which is again, getting customers to make their payments, getting customers into the seat of a new Ford or Lincoln vehicle. But I also think, and why I'm thrilled to be there, is we're also starting to mature as a product organization, i.e. experimentation, right? I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago may not have been kind of in the forethought of a product team as something that they can do or something that they can use to show value to the business. So we're definitely kind of growing up in front of my very eyes and learning how can experimentation be used in a variety of different products to learn not only about our customers, but learn about the potential business impact, right? And we talked about it. It's always this wonderful marriage, but also balance of like customer data, customer intent, and like business results. What does that mean? So that's the challenge right now, I think, is just kind of like making sure that we find something that suits both and not just, oh, well, this is good for the business, but it's a bad customer experience. It's like, it's a fine line there.
How'd you actually deal with that? Is that negotiating with stakeholders? How does that work?
I think it's a bit of road mapping. It's a bit of product strategy and also trying to determine, where perhaps our competitors are and where are we and where do we want to be. Now, I never want to, position any company as saying, well, what is your competitor doing? But if you're not looking, you're not trying, you should be looking at what your competitors are doing. And honestly, I think, I think Tesla really disrupted the automotive industry, and everybody, Ford, General Motors, the others kind of had to look and say, okay, you can buy a car online at Tesla, but at that time, I don't think you could perhaps at Ford or General Motors. And so now everyone's trying to kind of evolve a little bit. But it's a balance. It's trying to work with each individual product team to promote testing, albeit good testing, but testing nonetheless. Let's just test it. That's a great idea. I got an example. A product person I work with they're like, this is it. This is the product. Let's just put it in. I was like, man, let's test it though. Let's test. Oh, no. It's good. And I think ultimately, their leadership was like, no, you need to test this. And we did. And it didn't test well. And I think it was a bit of a shock. But we, after kind of doing some analysis, we're like, hey, this is what we potentially saved from this surefire thing, And so I think in that moment, that particular person learned, okay, maybe not all of my ideas are winners, and maybe I need to step into testing a little bit more. I have come to begrudgingly the understanding, though, that not everything needs to be tested. I still am always going to advocate for it, but there are times where it's like, hey, this is a back-end application or an API or something like that. We really need to modernize this. I'm like, okay, we don't need to test that, but we could. But is it, is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know, but I'm always going to advocate for testing anything, particularly customer facing. But it's taken me, I think, a couple of right hooks, to be like, all right, maybe we don't need to test that. Maybe I can kind of back off this time. But largely, let's learn. At the end of the day, it's just a test. We're just going to learn. But the saying is, and I now as a father, and I probably shouldn't say this, but hey, your baby's ugly. You know what I'm saying? Your idea wasn't that great of an idea, and here's the data that proves that to be true. Yeah. Sorry, for lack of a better term.
No, that's cool. Something you mentioned that is quite interesting. I want to go back into. You're in industry, so Ford, so automobile that has been revolutionized, obviously, by Tesla. There's so many industries like this that have been transformed, or the same way. If I think of hospitality with companies like Airbnbs, etc. They come in and they have completely new concept, and then the strategy. Yeah, Booking.com, Expedia, and sometimes you just want to copy them. How do you help product managers find their own identity, or maybe product directors, etc., to not just copy the competition, but actually find something that is actually good for them and for their customers? I
think an area that actually helps fuel experimentation, A/B testing, is that softer, I think it's referred to sometimes as qualitative research, user research. Yeah. Moderated user panels where you can, I think even there's some websites where you can go and say, hey, this is the audience that I'm looking for, right? And in my case.
Yeah, user testing, right?
Yeah, would be interested in perhaps buying a vehicle in the next year, 2 years or something like let's pull down 10, 15, 20 of them, throw them some questions, and you can kind of compile those questions and find themes to it, Oh, well, I'm interested, but I don't want to go talk to a banker. I don't want to go talk to a dealer until I'm really ready. Okay, well, let's learn from that and then use that to perhaps fuel hypothesis generation and ideas, and maybe even product ideas, So I think a good culture of learning, whether that be through experimentation exclusively or with user research, is blending both. But I think the user research, the softer stuff, is kind of the fuel to the fire of the more hard quantitative A/B testing results, where we could say without a shadow of a doubt, this is a good thing. This is a flat thing, an inconclusive thing, or this is a bad thing, you know? So user research and UX research teams, I think, are should be A/B testing, experimentation, and product folks' best friends.
How was the transition from Microsoft to Ford? Was it? I mean, for example, at Ford, do you work remotely, or do you? Is it? How does? What was the rhythm?
You know, I think one of the very few good things that came out of this global pandemic, I think we've all kind of realized that is the notion of remote work, particularly for those people who exclusively work on the internet. You know, so. And I probably would not have had the opportunity to work for Microsoft had it not been for a global pandemic. They opened up their hiring area out of maybe perhaps just the Pacific Northwest to the entire United States. So did that again for about a year and a half. And I was actually working for a West Coast company on the East Coast of the United States. So they were 3 hours behind me. So when I started my day, they were still in bed. But towards the end of my day, they were starting to get cranking up, you know? So like my WebEx or my Teams would be kind of chirping at 8:30, 9 p.m. at night on you know, my local time. But it was fine. It was like, okay, cool. You know, that's there. I'll get to it in the morning. And I think as a result as well with Ford Credit, they were like, hey, you know what? We could maybe open up our hiring pool, our talent pool to not just necessarily Detroit, you know, Detroit, Michigan, Southeast Michigan. We could maybe lean on the East Coast if we want, or maybe even open up to the West Coast. And I do believe that we have Ford Credit customers that are all the way, you know, over in California and even over here as well in London and in France as well. So it's been good. And, you know, it's just like anything. It's like a balance act. So as a remote worker, you know, you don't have the, quote, water cooler.
Yeah.
The lunch, you know. And I think at times you do miss a little bit of those personal relationships. However, I think it's important if you are a remote worker and if your team is remote, and something that we do that I'm actually quite proud of is I think monthly we'll have our quote happy hour, where it's not necessarily like, you know, we're not like sitting there and having champagne or anything. We'll just get together and like play some online games, you know, like, nice. Google Feud and categories, just to kind of like keep it light, keep it friendly and personal, because we get so, I don't know, maybe there's a distinction between US and French. We work so unbelievably hard every single day, every single test, you know, that I think we do need to like lighten up a little bit, but still keep the pedal down. But like, we're all in this thing together. We want to see good tests. We want to see good product. We want to see happy customers. And so let's work really hard at that, but let's also find some time to like create relationships and friends like we did perhaps pre-pandemic, you know?
True.
Where it would be easy to say, hey, we're going to go over here for lunch. You want to come? Okay, cool. You know, oh, we're going to go over here. We're going to go bowling or something like that. All right, cool. You don't have that as a remote worker. However, you balance that with no commuting in the morning. You know, your lunch is in the refrigerator right next to you. So there's like so many pros and cons. But I personally, I enjoy working remotely. And again, I would have never have had the opportunity to work for Microsoft and Ford Credit had it not been for remote work. So we'll see. And I think companies are kind of hip to that too. They're like, do I really need to spend thousands of dollars on retail space if I have a digital product?
And then you just have Amazon who announced that everybody needs to come back to the office, right? Mm-hmm. But is that maybe just an excuse to justify some decisions?
And I'm sure that as a company, they probably know, hey, we've got some deficient areas, you know, some areas where like, hey, if we had more people on the ground, feet on the ground, maybe we wouldn't have as many issues or returns or whatever it is. So I'm sure that they have their rationale for doing it. But I know, you know, I remember it like it was yesterday at Lowe's. They were like, hey, you know, with this COVID thing, take your computer home. You know, we might be working from home next week. And it was like 2 years later, we're still doing it. However, I'm fairly sure we did not miss a beat of productivity. In fact, I think it even like increased a little bit because like you're right there. There's no reason why you can't be on your computer, barring health, family reasons, you know. So I hope remote work is here to stay.
Hope so,
you know,
sir.
because that, again, it gives anybody an opportunity. If you have the drive and maybe the diligence to say, I want to go work for an auto manufacturer in Detroit, you can. I want to go work for a tech company out in California, you can. And you don't have to be local to those areas. I think it's a great thing.
Agreed. And so last question or last subject tomorrow, obviously you have an amazing talk about AI. AI has been the conversation for the past, 2 years now? I don't remember. How do you see AI impacting experimentation on the short, medium, long term?
Gosh, you know, it's like you could go so many places with this.
Of course.
I think tooling is one piece of the puzzle, right? Chameleon has a bunch of really good AI tools where they can help an experimenter spin up a new variation of a test. They've got a great, I think it's called Copilot or Chameleon Artificial Intelligence, that can help you get to support documents a lot faster and easier, right? So like tooling, I think there already is and there will be continually advancements in how AI and generative AI can help the perhaps somewhat novice, even like beginning experimenter get more variations out there, or learn from the test that you run, and you can kind of see through AI cohorts of visitors that did really well or conversely did really poorly. And you can kind of, well, why did these type of visitors do so well, but why did these types of visitors do so poorly? And you can kind of like lean into that, and that just promotes iteration, more hypotheses. Well, why did these guys? Let's go run a test against just this cohort. Let's go run a test against just this cohort. So the tooling, I think, will enable younger, more less mature organizations to like adopt experimentation and promote, get more variations out there, get more learnings, make more correct decisions in data, right? Assuming that the tool, and I have all the belief in Chameleon, Adobe, my tool over at Ford Credit is Optimizely. They have wonderful reporting, wonderful dashboards where you can be like, yeah, I do believe in this data. So I think the tooling, you know, AI and tooling is going to be is going to continue to evolve. One area I think I'm most interested in and trying to continue to lean in on and do a little bit more diligence, whether that be through the use of ChatGPT or Gemini or whomever the AI provider is like, because I'm not a developer, and coding, there's so many languages.
Yeah.
Angular, React, Java, you know, and at my eyes, I can't look at code and be like, oh, that's Java, or that's, you know, HTML, or that's some things I can be like, okay, that looks somewhat familiar. I know enough to be dangerous, but let's use OpenAI, ChatGPT. Let's upload some code. And what is AI telling us about this code? Is there deficiencies in this code? Are there areas that, you know, we could maybe clean up this code? So I personally would love to be able to do more through the use of AI with coding and development. I think one of the gentlemen I'm going to be working with, he had a good point about how I think developers I think are going to learn that they can lean on AI to do more of perhaps their repetitive, boring, I don't want to call it boring coding,
yeah.
you know, but
No, it totally makes sense.
Hey, ChatGPT, create me a React element that shows a customer portal login page.
Yeah.
Boom. You know, what maybe would have taken he or she 2 or 3 days can be done now in milliseconds. That's wild to me. And then I think the last of the development, so there's tooling, development, and then I think just the last one, I think that we'll kind of get there will be like, you know, as teams grow and you run more tests, you kind of start to categorize each test, and you kind of start, I call it like a library, you know, and you put the book on the shelf that was this test. That shelf is dedicated to product pages, right? the next shelf below it is dedicated to things that we can do to increase like a revenue per visitor or something. However you kind of like categorize your bookshelf and your library, how can we then apply AI to that entire library and start to like maybe pull out, hey, between this, that, and that, this test, that, you know, there's something in here that we could maybe connect the dots and try and create a test or an experiment just based on these couple of inputs. I think that would be really cool to be able to try and like connect these dots of various tests across different parts of a website or different products that make up a larger like web interface. And then probably the final point of that too is like through the use of like an AI agent or something like that. Like, hey, show me all tests where on list pages we were trying to get customers into a product detail page, or we were trying to reduce bounce rates, and they could go boom, 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 boom. Here's your 7 tests. Go look at them. What can you learn from those? Rather than historically, at least in my case over at Lowe's, was, you know, we used Jira as a ticketing system, which is a wonderful. I'm a big fan of Jira. We also use it at Credit. We also had Confluence, which was like our repository, our library of tests that we ran. And it was kind of almost like business as usual. Once your test wrapped up, you go put your results into Confluence, give it a naming convention, and that's where it lived, right? And I think rarely did we go back there.
Yeah.
But again, if you have enough volume of completed tests, I think repositories and like libraries, I think there's definitely some application for AI to like go and cut through the noise of all of these tests.
No, it's true.
You know?
I didn't think about it, but it's true. Quite often you run so many tests and you never go back to them. You know, having something like a chatbot or whatever that you can question about your previous test, and that can answer really rapidly your question, that could be super powerful.
I think so too. And you know, as experimenters, I want to test everything. And but I also have to balance, like, well, did we test this already? Or if we did, like, well, what was the nuance for that test compared to this test? Was it button color? Is it CTA copy, right? Get started today. Start now. You know, you can go and okay, maybe we did do this test, but we didn't do this particular aspect or component of this test. And going into your library to determine it. Because I will say, however, too, on the other side of the coin, if someone comes at me and says, this is the test I want to do, if I've got results already that kind of prove that hypothesis to be true, I might be like, no, we're not going to run that test. We've already done that. We've already determined that what you're hypothesizing is either true or untrue. Here's the data for it. So no, we're not going to test that. That would be a waste of development resources. And, you know, we need to be, and that's probably, you know, I'll try and land this plane like, you know, capital, human capital, and like, what is everyone's time worth? Like, we really need to try and balance like testing volume versus testing quality. You know what I'm saying? And we talked about it a little bit, front end, back end. Like, hey, great, go crank out a couple front end tests, and like, what do they tell you? But our developers, our software engineers, like, they need to be focused on, I think, more impactful back end server code, feature code. That I think is pretty important, because we talked about it. Like, those I think are the more impactful tests, but they're also the more challenging, complex development setup. What are you measuring? You know, so you know, AI's got limitless potential, and me personally, I'm looking forward to kind of leaning into it, not only professionally, but you said it too, how you use it personally. I need to use my, you know, ChatGPT a little bit more frequently. I toyed around with it a little bit before I came here. I was like, how do you say please and thank you in French, you know? And like, boom, boom, it spits you out real fast. So we're scratching the surface on AI. But definitely. I mean, those are just a couple of examples, I think, where it can be and how it can be used.
Last time I asked you, what is experimentation? You had a fantastic answer about it.
Let me think. What is experimentation? I mean,
did you view change actually on what is experimentation between your experience at Microsoft and that Ford? Me personally, every time I have a new client, my view kind of on experimentation
Really?
changes a little bit.
Obviously, you balance multiple clients that have different ecosystems, different goals. I have almost kind of only been with a single organization with a single goal in mind, But at the end of the day, like, what is experimentation? To me, it actually is kind of still the same. It's just like, how do we generate and provide, like, I hate saying it, so cliche, data-driven decisions, everything is data-driven. But now I'm starting to hear a little bit more about insights, like insights-driven. Like, okay, we've got all these data points, but like, what are the insights that we're generating from all of these data points? So, I mean, it's still at the end of the day is like, I want to provide my customers are product managers and product teams. I want to provide them with data that they can stand on, that they can make good business decisions on. Do we ship this or do we not, or do we iterate on it? But I think to try and land like the insights aspect of it, I think will be maybe perhaps down the road a little bit more, is like data-driven decisions. All of those promote insights. How do insights impact business? That to me it's just, shipping good products. That's what that's what we want. We want to balance good products for customers and good products for business. That's it. I don't know if that matched what I said last time. Maybe my definition has changed from when we first did this over a year ago.
We'll check if there's a difference. It was so cool to have you, man. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Alexandre. Thank you to Henkin and Partners. Fail Fast Forward. You guys are a great platform for promoting experimentation. I think you and I, everyone in this room, we believe in it. I think our goal is to get others to believe in it.
Exactly.
It's
not a religion, though.
No, and you can have multiple belief systems, but if you're in product, if you're in digital, your intuition is one thing, but data is another sometimes, and they don't always match up and marry, and that's the beauty of it to me. And then I'll never forget it. Like, my first director for experimentation, I was like, hey, why did you get involved? He's like, the truth is in the data. He's like, you know what, you don't have to like me, but you will appreciate and understand this data that I'm presenting to you, and you can then make decisions on it, however you see fit. But the truth is in the numbers, and that's what I like about experimentation. It's usually it should be black and white. There's a lot of gray area that we've talked about, but it should be concise and clear. This is a good thing. This is a bad thing. Do with it what you will.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me in your beautiful city of Paris. Appreciate it.